Hi, everybody. My name's my name's Davey Neal. I'm teaching elementary school. I teach in our system. I teach what is called fifth grade. So my students are around 10, 11 years old. Um, at my school, now I'll differentiate because I teach at an American school. So I teach American children with American passports, when we teach an American curriculum. And so those children, we teach reading, writing, math, science, social studies. Sometimes we call it humanities. We have physical education, we have art, and we have music. And then, of course, we have language. They learn language, so they learn Chinese. Now, children here in China that go to local schools, they also get similar subjects, but with obviously all of their instruction would be in Chinese, and they get a lot more exposure naturally to Chinese literature and Chinese literacy. So,
hello, sir. How are you?
Good. How are you? What's your name?
I'm fine, sir. My name is Dixit, and I'm trainer from B section.
Nice to meet you.
Sir, I'm so thrilled to ask you a question. Can I?
Absolutely.
What schools are popular in China, public or private?
Popular in China. It's a funny question. I would say all schools are popular in China. There's a tremendous value that goes along with education in this country as part of this culture. So, for those that have money, they spend, that have means, that have financial resources, they spend tremendous amounts of money sending children to private schools here within the country, including my school, for that matter. But generally speaking, I would say that there's a tremendous popularity. Popularity is the right word here in China for children to go to school, to get good grades, to keep going to school as a means of financial security, financial independence, being able to get ahead in life, being part of the middle class. Education is extremely important and valued in this country. So, whatever sector of society that you're from, I would say that education here is very popular, both public and private.
Could you please tell us about life like in China?
What is life like in China? Well, it I think there's some commonalities. There's some things that maybe living in India and living in China that we have in common. You're a country of, as I understand, you're a country that has a bigger population than that of China right now. And I think that's a recent phenomenon. So I live in Shanghai. We're a city of about 25, 26 million people. It's pretty busy. It's pretty crowded. There's lots of cars. It's very bustling. It's always a busy city throughout the year. That stated, much like India, as I understand, it is very busy modernizing, and the government makes great effort to improve the lives of people throughout the country. There always seems to be something being built or something new. There's new metro lines, new roads, new highways. The internet seems to get faster every year. The there seems to be more and more convenience the longer that I've stayed. So it is it's still a rapidly growing country, but it's changing more rapidly than any other place I've seen. So like I said, I'm originally from Canada, and growth there and change, I find it to be quite slow. But here in China, everything seems to move and change very, very quickly. And it seems that the longer you stay, the better things, the more things improve and the better things get. So in short, it's a pretty exciting and fun place to live.
Ninth grader from GVHS school, Ailavaram. I'm going to ask a question. Can I ask, sir?
Yes, please, by all means, go ahead.
How is technology used in China classroom?
How is technology used in the classroom? That is a very good question. I would say that throughout the country, and I'm sure that you have some familiarity with this in India. There's I would say that most people within the country are students are connected to their phone. So there's many different services and technologies that students are invited to use in the classroom. And I'll speak locally, where phones are kind of a part of daily life. Phones are everywhere. They're used in schools. They're used on the street. They're used in pretty much every aspect of people's lives. And people have kind of grown very accustomed to this, including in education. So we have in China, we have these, I think you have versions of these, but we have apps that are called, what you might call them, super apps, where some apps, like in one single app, there's an app that we have, it's called Alipay, where and another app called WeChat, where people can connect and they can share information. They can, order food, buy train tickets, online shop. They can order a taxi. They can buy airline tickets, etc. And it's these single apps, not several apps. One app can basically, you can do everything that you want to in your life, including manage a classroom in some ways. And people here in China have grown very accustomed to using their phone from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. So you really see people leverage technology here in education in ways that perhaps they wouldn't be doing in other parts of the world. Like, for instance, in the United States, like there's a movement right now for some schools to ban cell phones inside the school for the entire day. And that's a new thing. And they're actually passing that into law in some states in back in America. Whereas here in China, they really seem to embrace this. Like they see that there's a lot of power and potential for learning, for sharing knowledge, for sharing expertise, and for engagement inside the classroom. So I don't necessarily feel that way, but I would say it's pretty widely accepted here by educators. In my own school myself, we do not. Again, I teach at a private school. I teach at a private American school. We put our phones away all day. So there's a little bit of a disparity there between what I would call local schools and private international schools.
So whenever I hear the word China, it develops a lot of curiosity. because India and China actually they started their progress in the same era, but China today has become a world-dominated economy, uh, almost close to the United States of America, whereas Indian economy is not as much competitive as China. What do you think about the China's rapid development in terms of economy and as well as other sectors? How do you see China as a growing economy and developed economy?
Great, good. One thing I would say that I have learned about China in the time that I have been and the time that I've been here is that is China always seems to plan long term. They seem to be thinking decades, decades down the road. So the modernization of the Chinese economy dates back to one of their former great leaders, by the name man by the name of Deng Xiaoping, down back in the 1980s, where it was just he just kind of saw the writing on the wall with the communist system as it was, and he ferociously set up a plan to modernize the economy, not within years, but within a generation, within within a few decades, where you know the state-owned industries would be sold off, and they would privatize the economy, and there'd be more what do they call it, state-sponsored authoritarian, like capitalist authoritarianism here, where basically they had a plan to change this economy so that it can be so it could meet the kind of moment of globalization that the world was heading in, and they did so well, and they moved so many, I think the current stat, or the stat from the last 30 years, I think they moved 300 million people out of what you might call like poverty or extreme poverty, and they moved them into cities. There was rapid urbanization. They got people they got people out of rural areas. They transformed so much of the country, places that used to be like the rural outskirts in the middle part of the country, and now they have massive manufacturing sectors, corridors that stretch on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of just nothing but factories, particularly down south. And this was all none of this was an accident. This was all part of a plan to modernize this economy so that it could be there'd be prosperity for the country itself, but also for the people, and which in its own way is a communist ideal. Like they really focus on the greatest good, the greater good, and that of the country. And so I think China's memory of the 20th century was something of an embarrassment for them, and they felt relegated to being considered like a second or third tier power. And they take that very personally, and they take that very hard. And they're very determined that this will be the Chinese century. This will be they will have the biggest economy. They will have the biggest they will have the biggest military. They will have the biggest they will have the greatest GDP. They will dominate in areas where 30 years ago they had no footprint or presence. And so I think it's part of a long, and again, getting back, I think this is by design. Like this is not short-term thinking. Their grand plan is for the ascendance of the People's Republic of China to ascend to its rightful place amongst the elite of nations and making itself a global or the global superpower.
Okay, Devi, thank you so much. And one more curious question. Recently, India has overtaken the record of China in terms of population. So,
Yep.
what do you think that China, how could it control its population once it was a populated country, and now it has become a second highest populated country in the world? What measures has the Chinese government taken to reduce the population ratio?
Um, um, it, okay, well, that's a great question, but it's actually it's not by design. So the there's a couple things. There's some energies going on within the Chinese country that is also going on in other East Asian nations, and that is that the average age, the population of this country is graying. So the average age is going up incrementally. And having said that, there's another problem that's going on, and that I won't call it a problem, and that is that children, the country's just not reproducing, and so there's what they call a population bomb that is going on. So the fact that India overtook China in the last couple of years, I think in the last 18 months, came as no surprise to most Chinese people. Most younger people are either waiting or they're not having kids. Kids are an expense. The younger generation these days, they've kind of realized it's like in order for them to get ahead, they either need to postpone or just not have kids in order for them to have what their parents have had. And so kids it sounds funny, but children for this generation are what are called a luxury item. And not all members of this generation are as keen to have kids as their parents were. And you probably remember a policy back in China, like in the 1970s and 1980s, the one policy. Yeah, that policy's gone. I think they're up to 3 now, where like the government needs people to they literally need babies. They need babies because if there's not babies, there's going to be an employment crisis that's going to take place sometime in the coming decades, where there's just not going to be enough workers to man the factories. There's not going to be enough workers to run the economy. There's not going to be enough people in the service sector. There's not going to be enough people there's just not going to be enough people. And it's one thing if GDP remains constant and the economy keeps growing, but if you don't have workers, if you don't have people to sustain the economy at the rate that you're used to, there's going to be a crisis. And so there's being more and more written about what China is going to do to try and increase the birth rate. I'm not up to date about what the measures about the measures that are being taken, but I know it's of great concern to the government.
Actually, avoided the policy of entertaining the English medium, and it only entertained the Mandarin in their schools. But today it has changed its policy and now inviting the English medium schools in their cities and their schools. So what made the China to change its policy from Mandarin to English medium?
From Mandarin to English?
Yes.
Well, they still teach Mandarin at local schools. So a little bit of background. There was a there's a policy that happened a few years ago, around 20, I think it was around 2020, 2021, where the Chinese government basically closed down a sector of the economy, and that was the English private tutoring schools. So English School Foundation, there was English First, it was a huge sector of the economy. It was worth about almost $100 billion. But the Chinese government figured something out, and that was that these schools that were being run both domestically, and sometimes there was partial foreign ownership. These schools were basically tools for the wealthier middle class and upper class to get their kids ahead. And it wasn't something, there was a public perception that that was really the only way that rich kids could like go to a good foreign school or go to school outside of China. Like it was basically, it was like like a luxury. And China, in one fell swoop, one summer, just basically said, we're shutting you down. All of the permits that we have for these schools, all of this sector is done. There's no more English support schools. There's no more what they call bushi bonds. There's no more extra classes in English. We'll teach English locally at local schools, and we'll teach it, as a single subject. But the private schools that we have within the country, and again, huge part of the private education sector in the country, the government just shut them down. I think I had 14 or 15 friends that were all teaching at these schools. They are mostly from the UK and Australia, but like in a matter of 2 weeks, they're all unemployed. Their schools were shuttered. They were done. Like that was it. They had to go find other. If they needed to stay, they had to find other employment, or had to go back to Australia or the UK. So I think the government kind of realized that if we can't offer an education that is fair and equal access for everyone, and not just people of means and wealth, then we're not going to offer it. And I think that there was a public perception that sector of the economy was just like, it was like a luxury. It was just like, oh, that's what rich people use so their kids can get ahead. And that's how their kids are going to get into university, and how my kid's going to get left behind. So if I don't have enough money, my kid's not going to get the education that he or she deserves. And whereas the wealthier people are going to have exactly just that. So the government just basically said, nope, we're getting rid of this, and for it to be fair and egalitarian and socialist in philosophy, we're going to get rid of these schools. So I think that was about 3 years ago.
Okay. Davey, here is one more question.
Sure.
As you know, you have been to many developed countries all over the world. I think you are born and brought up in Canada and USA, maybe, and other developed countries. Compared to these developed countries in the world, how well ahead of China development in terms of infrastructure compared to the other countries? How Chinese infrastructure is most advanced infrastructure in your view?
I could talk about this all day. I'm a bit of an infrastructure junkie. And it kind of gets back to what I was talking about earlier about, the Chinese. I think the Chinese really felt held back for much of the 20th century. And because of their ambitions to be a global superpower, they just spend they can't spend money fast enough on infrastructure to update their cities, to have like world-class rail networks, to to highways, freeway systems, new airports. Everything in this country looks like it was out of the box and made in like the last 5 years, at least around Greater Shanghai. The coasts are just it's particularly in Shanghai, which I would call, it's a tier one city. It's just everything is just being built and then built again. It's just such rapid economic development and growth. The infrastructure and the money that they put into it is just phenomenal. And as somebody who's an expatriate, as somebody that's I'm my wife is from here, so I'm kind of Chinese. I just marvel at the rate at which things get done. I mean, I'm from Canada, and like the rate of the rate of change and development back in Canada is so slow. Like to put a stop sign up, it seems like it's almost like a moon landing. Like it's just like things are so glacial. The 20th century, there was a lot of development, but it is slowed down so much where it seems that it seems that to compare it to a place like what's going on here in Asia, and the growth that we see and the amount of money and capital expenditure that they spend to develop their cities into places that people actually want to live, it's a marvel. It's a marvel. And so for me, I find it very tantalizing, and I find it very moving to be in such an exciting part of the world at this moment in history, because it's just exciting. It's just, I don't know how else to put it. It's just exciting to see a place where there's so much growth, so much employment, it's so busy, and it just seems that there's this human dynamism where everything is being built so quickly and for the great benefit for the benefit of the greater good. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. In Olympic Games, whenever the Olympic Games takes place, China's domination continues. Maybe the in Indian perspective, as a being an Indian and being the highly populated country in the world, but India's chances in winning the one gold medal is very remote. So thanks to the kind of the investment that government puts into these games. So what kind of action plan? What kind of action plan does the Chinese government take in each and every school to make these kids to be the future Olympians?
Whenever I see it, it just seems to be something that I don't know. I don't really understand or know much about. It seems to be done. It's almost like a secret government program where it's just like they have these. It's all behind closed doors, and then for special events, they take these people out of glass cases, and they're almost like military assets.
That's really interesting. So healthcare. How is the healthcare in China? Is the healthcare accessible to all the common people living in China, or only rich people can get the accessibility of the healthcare?
Great question. Technically speaking, everyone has access to healthcare. But if you can afford better healthcare, you can get it. That's the polite way to put it. For most commoners, for most common people, get in line. And I hope that doesn't sound, but like that's really what they would tell you. Is the I mean, it's 1.4 billion people. So when people get sick, it's got an aging population. People have needs. People, are in imperfect health, and when that happens, they go to the doctor. And when you live in a city with 25 million people with a finite amount of hospitals, hospitals get really busy. Always, 24 hours a day. They're busy. And the country's not educating. I shouldn't, the country wants to, but to become a doctor is a long process. And the country just doesn't make enough of them to ever satisfy the demand. And so it's a challenge. And I'm very sympathetic because I have friends and relatives that, my mother-in-law, who, when she gets sick, she has to go to the hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning so that she can get in line and get a ticket and hopefully see a doctor before lunchtime. Maybe. So it's it's a system that is victim to its own popularity.
Mhm.
As I'm sure, Hari, you can relate. Like, with that many people to take care of, there's challenges. It's just like education. With that many kids, with that many kids in this many kids here in China, to educate 130 million children under the age of 14 every day, like, or throughout the country, like that's a staggering challenge. Like and to do it effectively, and to do it so you're nurturing their minds, and inspiring curiosity, and doing all those things that we as educators do. It's a challenge. I have friends that teach in local schools that, I have 22 kids in my class, and I have friends that teach in local schools. They have 50 kids in a classroom that's smaller than mine. So, like healthcare, like education, like, so much, like living in a country with this many people, as great as exciting as it is at times, there's costs, there's anxieties that go along with being in a place this populated.
Okay, here is my last question, Devi. You have answered to my questions quite patiently. In terms of the food that the Chinese take, as per the Indian style, we
My
consume
favorite.
we consume only a few things like chicken, mutton, and of course pork. So as per my knowledge, Chinese leave nothing. They eat everything when it comes to the animals. So that's what we heard. Actually, I don't know exactly what's the reality. And may I know what kind of food the Chinese usually consume and what they don't like to eat? I mean, whether when it comes to the vegetarian food or non-vegetarian food.
Um, oh, I would say that Chinese tastes have adapted in the last 30 years. They're much more open to Western confections, Western restaurants. You see a lot of fast food, McDonald's, KFC, like they're, especially in big cities, they're all over that. That's fine. Like they like the idea of quick and dirty Western food. They have no problem with that. And then that wasn't always the case. But I would say that the fast food market here has grown exponentially in the last 20 years. As far as the day to day, yeah, you're not wrong when you say that they do eat everything. They eat beef, they eat chicken, they love pork. They have uh, they have some interesting take. Like for my palate, they eat a lot of eat a lot of fatty food, like fatty meats. As part of their diet, they love cooking with oil. They love saturated and unsaturated fats. They eat a healthy amount of vegetables. Obviously, they eat a lot of rice. Um, but again, it's like, in India, like you can travel 200 miles and the diet's, from one city to another city, and the cuisine's going to be different. Same is very true here in China. Like up north, they eat I would say I would find the dishes up in northern China, I find them quite boring. They seem to just really like salt and uh, salt and salt and soy. They like duck. Whereas if you go down south, it's a lot spicier. You got a lot more chicken, a lot more vegetables in the dishes, a lot more color and flavor. Um, Kind of like it's just like when you're in India. It's just kind of like there's different cuisines for different regions, and the same is very true here in China. I mean, there's so many different provinces, and each province has its own dish. Each province has its own kind of claim to some local cuisine that they say that they do better than anybody else. Um, I have my own fancies down south. I love spicy food, so I'm all about Szechuan. I'm all about the southern provinces, Shanxi province down there, Chengdu, anything down there. The food is just prepared. It's so good. It's so succulent, and of course, it's so spicy. I could live there throughout the year and die a happy man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Could you please give a message to my students? In fact, my students in the background are not there. They have just gone outside. And yes, could you please give a message to my students? Of course, they watch this video.
Uh, Hey, to Harry students, hey, thank you all for having me. It's a joy. I feel very honored and blessed. This is my second time on the show. It's always a delight and a pleasure to talk to people who come from backgrounds very different from myself. Thanks for letting me into your classroom and into your lives. I wish you all the best. And when in doubt, listen to Teacher Hari.